Wednesday night. Let's hang out for the Panther-Lair Show on a Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. As always, we get it going and talk a little Pitt sports. And it's been it's been a week, to say the least. And it's funny. I was trying to think of what we were talking about last week. I was trying to think about what we were talking about last Wednesday. And, what our tone was, what our expectations were, what we all sort of agreed was going to happen when, Pitt went to Georgia Tech. I mean, you go back to last Wednesday and you figure, in the aftermath of the New Hampshire game, we're all trying to figure out, what do we think about Pitt? They won this game 77-7. They beat an FCS team. They're going to go into the conference, and they're going to play, an ACC team on the road for the first time. The only other time they faced an FBS team already, but they lost to a non-Power 5 team. And, what are they really going to do against a talented team? And Georgia Tech slowed down North Carolina's offense. And what are they, is going to be a challenge. What are they going to be able to do? And I expected them to win. I expected Pitt to go out and beat Georgia Tech. I'm not sure that I expected them to beat Georgia Tech by 30. I'm not sure that I don't think that I expected them to dominate in the way that they did. And I'm not sure that I expected to come out of that game feeling the way that I do about this team and their prospects for the rest of the season. I definitely didn't expect to come out of that game thinking, I didn't expect to come out of that game seeing the national hype for Pitt that we've seen in the aftermath, of the last 4 days or whatever it's been since that win at Georgia Tech. And the hype has been, when was the last time hype was this high for Pitt football? On a national scale. I'm not even talking locally because I know Pitt fans have their reservations and their hesitations and their concerns. They don't want to get too high. They don't want to get too low. Actually, they don't have a problem with getting too low, but they don't want to get too high. They don't want to, run their expectations up. They don't want to set the expectations too high. They don't want to buy in. I understand that that's how Pitt fans are, but when you look at the national recognition and the national expectations, you start seeing, by the end of that game, the announcers on TV, I think it was on the ACC network, were talking about Pitt's the favorite to win the Coastal. You get out of the weekend and there are odds on, ESPN's FPI and, I guess probably some of the betting sites that have Pitt, installed as the favorite to win the conference outright, to go to Charlotte and win the ACC championship game. The FPI, ESPN's Football Power Index has like a 9% chance of Pitt making the college football playoffs and like a 0.2% chance of winning the damn thing. How do you feel about that? Because I can't get my head around it. I can't get my head around what has transpired in the last 4 days, and I can't get my head around the impact of a road win at Georgia Tech, a dominant win, an impressive win, a blowout win. When was the last time Pitt came out of a game against an ACC opponent, and the opponent, the opponent's writers and the people talking about that game were referring to it as a debacle for their team? There have been some times when, teams have had things go against them. They've had bad games and they've played miserable. They've had miserable performances against Pitt. But Georgia Tech really looked at that as a game where Pitt just took them down, out-coached them and outplayed them and out-executed them. And yeah, that's what they were talking about. They're talking about how did we get out-coached by Pitt. Which, I think one of the favorite refrains of Pitt fans is, when was the last time, a Pitt team out-coached, won because they out-coached. And I think it's never just one thing. It's always a combination. And I think when you look at the game on Saturday, you look at the Georgia Tech game, Pitt out-coached, outplayed, and out-executed Georgia Tech. On both sides of the ball. More offense than defense, but on both sides of the ball. And now the Panthers are sitting here. They're 4-1 overall. They're 1-0 in the ACC. They've got an off week before they begin this sort of 7-game stretch run. of a march through the ACC to find out if they can win this Coastal Division and ultimately compete for the conference championship. There's a lot of games left to play. But, and I know we have to every week come out of, the weekend with this team is the favorite in their division. This team is the favorite in their conference. And we do this in the NFL, and we do this in college football. We do this in every sport. I think in baseball we have a little bit, Major League Baseball, we have at least a little more patience. But not much. We're constantly ranking, all right? They're power rankings every week. There are power rankings in all these sports. And so I know that we do this. And I know that we had to come out of this weekend where everybody's playing conference games. And we had to say, okay, who's the favorite to win the Coastal? Who's the favorite to win the ACC? And as Clemson continues to struggle, and, they lost 2 weeks ago to NC State, and they barely got past Boston College this past weekend. As those things continue to happen, as Clemson continues to struggle, this conference appears more and more wide open. And I think that was one of our talking points last week when the Panther-Lair Show last Wednesday night, is we talked about it. This conference seems to be really wide open for anybody to jump up and get it. And that opportunity is presenting itself to Pitt, but it's presenting itself to everyone else in the league as well. But now, after one game, one game for Pitt, some of these teams, I think Carolina's played like 5 conference games so far, or 4 conference games. Some of these guys are halfway through their conference schedule already. And I think Carolina in particular has a game at the end of the season against NC State that I believe is they might have a game against like Wake Forest that's billed as a non-conference game. It doesn't count in their conference standings, but or in their conference record. But we're at a point now where everybody's played a conference game. And you come out of that weekend, and I think everybody came out of that weekend and looked and said, well, who's strong? Who looks good? And there were very few teams that looked better than Pitt did. Very few teams in the ACC that looked better than Pitt coming out of this last weekend. But what do you think about it, though? How are you, as you sit here on Wednesday, heading into an off week, everybody else in the ACC is going to play this weekend. Some of the teams are going to look good. Some are going to look bad. There's actually only 5 conference games. No, 5 conference games this weekend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coastal teams are playing. 4 Atlantic teams are playing. There's 5 total games in the conference this weekend. Virginia Tech is one of them, and they're playing Notre Dame. So, not everybody is playing this weekend, but they're going to come out of this next weekend, and we're going to be talking again about division favorites and, conference favorites and all of those things. And Pitt's going to be right in the heart of that discussion heading into next weekend's game at Virginia Tech. 3:30 kickoff at Lane Stadium. Not a night game, so you're not going to have that prime time Lane Stadium Enter Sandman crowd. But 3:30 gives you plenty of time during the day to get tuned up. They're going to be rowdy. They're going to be fired up. And Pitt, I don't know if they'll climb into the rankings on an off week. It's possible, I guess. But, Pitt definitely, at this point, because of all the hype and all the talk, has a target on his back. So as you're sitting here on Wednesday, heading into this off week, ahead of a very important game, crucial game, a game we talked about in August as being one of the most important games on the schedule for Pitt, although I don't know if we anticipated them having this sort of hype around them at this point. How are you sitting with all this? This is the Panther-Lair Show, of course. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. All these things. It's it's where we like to go to report Pitt sports news and go to message boards and hang out and chat with other Pitt fans, right? And it's kind of like these conversations we have here on Wednesday nights where we get together and talk about Pitt sports for an hour or so and just share our thoughts and feelings. And I gotta feel like Pitt fans are in your feelings right now. And I can tell it on the message boards. There's a lot of activity, a lot of people talking, a lot of things going on, but nobody's I just get the sense I think people are sort of nervous a little bit. Because the hype is there and the expectations are growing, and maybe our vision of what the potential is for this team is broadening out. So it's gonna be interesting. But there are definitely some interesting conversations on the message boards this week. Of course, I've got home field on. It's the what do I have? The vintage rock look Pittsburgh Panthers shirt there. Homefieldapparel.com is a place you want to go to get, I mean, some of the best Pitt gear you're going to find. I mean, shirts and sweatshirts. I think they have other knickknacks and whatnot, bric-a-brac that you can find there at the Home Field website. But I think the shirts and the sweatshirts are the way to go. And remember, if you're a first-time customer there, you can use the promo code LAIR, L-A-I-R, to get 15% off your Pitt or any apparel you want to buy from homefieldapparel.com. The shirts are super high quality. They're soft. They hold their shape. I like a good t-shirt, and not just the design on it, but the quality of the shirt. And it's really high quality stuff from Home Field. And I mean, as you can see, it's just a great look. You know what I mean? Like, they got some great designs there. So I highly recommend it. homefieldapparel.com. Go check that out for their Pitt stuff. And remember, promo code LAIR. If you're a first-time customer, you get 15% off. So you can't beat that. Great, high-quality product and a discount, right? All right, as always, on Wednesday nights, we like during these live streams to have the chat screen going. It's a chance for you to interact, conversation. We can go back and forth. You can ask questions, post comments, reactions, whatever you have to say. And then, of course, you can be a super chatter. You can get on the... there's a little dollar sign down there. If you want to throw a couple bucks at the podcast, we'll be sure to read your comments and questions. Michael B is one of our regular super chatters every week. We appreciate you. Says, hey Chris, no questions this week. I hate as a fan having a bye week, but maybe it gives them a chance to rest players. Anyways, that's all, and keep up the good work. Thanks, Michael B. Yeah, it's every year we go back and forth and debate the best time for a bye, the worst time for a bye. I think last year they opened with like 8 straight weeks or 8 straight games with a bye. Last year I think they didn't have their bye. Or no, last year you were supposed to get 2 off weeks. You were supposed to get 2 bye weeks, and they had one after Notre Dame and they had one after Clemson. It was the final week of the season. So that doesn't count. That doesn't count as an off week. It's the final week of the season. It's not like you're getting extra time to rest up for your next game. They ended up having another game because they rescheduled the Georgia Tech game to the following week. But as the schedule was originally conceived, that shouldn't have counted as an off week. Now, I mean, they were rebuilding that schedule last year due to COVID, and I think they wanted to build in 2 off weeks for every team just in case they needed to reschedule games, which ultimately ended up being the case, and for a bunch of teams. Pitt's got rescheduled. The Georgia Tech game got rescheduled to after the season. It didn't even use that open week that they left on Pitt's schedule. But either way, I go back and forth on when the best time is to have a bye week. They've played 5 games. That's pretty close to halfway through the season. I think coaches would rather have it a little bit later, maybe after week 7 or after week 8, somewhere in that second half of the season. But right now, you're 5 games in. You go a few weeks, and then you have the Thursday night game against North Carolina. That's going to give you another weekend off, a little bit of an extra break. You have shorter break heading into the Carolina game. You go from Saturday to Thursday, but then you go a little bit long Thursday to the following Saturday. So you get a little bit of an extra break there. It is what it is, I'm sure, is what the coaches would say, and I think you take the break when you can get it. You go out on the road recruiting, which the coach has been doing this week, and you try to get the players healthy, give them a little rest, and gear up for a pretty crucial stretch run, even if the stretch run is 7 games. RJC Man 38, he's a super chatter. We appreciate him always jumping in. See what he says. Anything less than 10 wins will solidify Narduzzi as an average coach, not able to produce a great season. 10 wins in the regular season means you only lose 1 more game. I don't know. I know they're, ESPN, again, their FPI or whatever it is, they're favored to win every game the rest of the way, even against Clemson, even if it's by the slimmest of margins. I don't think they're going to go undefeated the rest of the way. Are they going to only have 1 loss the rest of the way? Do they go 6-1? I wouldn't be surprised to see 5-2, which would put Pitt at 9-3, which is what I predicted at the beginning of the season. I think if they go 5-2, that would leave them, 6-2 in the ACC, which should be good enough to win the Coastal Division. I think particularly when you look at where the rest of the league is right now, or not even the rest of the league, but the rest of the division. I'm just bringing up the site here. You've got, North Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia Tech already have 2 losses in conference play. Duke and Miami have 1 each. Pitt and Virginia Tech are the only teams that are undefeated in conference play. And so those other teams are already struggling. You know what I mean? You know, North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia Tech, they need to, win out to have a chance effectively. I mean, this could be the kind of year where 5-3 wins the division. I don't know. We'll know more in a couple weeks when we see which teams really start to separate themselves. But, you look at this weekend's games, Georgia Tech plays at Duke. All right. So either Duke wins and Georgia Tech, falls to 1-3 in the conference and they're effectively eliminated, or Georgia Tech wins and now you've got another team with 2 losses already in conference play. Virginia's at Louisville. That's a huge game for them. Louisville 3-2 overall. They're 1-1 in the conference. They just lost. They just lose this past weekend. All these games are running together on me. Louisville here. I have the hit the wrong button. Trying to bring it up here. Louisville just lost to Wake Forest, but 37-34. That was a close game. So given Wake Forest everything they can handle, Wake Forest looks like, by the record, they're the best team in the conference right now, 5-0, 3-0. If Virginia loses that game at Louisville, they're going to have 3 losses in the conference. Carolina is going to Florida State. That should be a game that Carolina wins, you would think. And if they lose, I mean, Florida State just finally got a win. Finally got their first, not just their first ACC win, their first win of the season. They beat Syracuse on Saturday, I guess it was. But if Carolina Carolina's hosting Florida State, if Carolina wins or loses that game, they're going to have 3 losses, and they'll be effectively out of it. And then Virginia Tech is hosting Notre Dame. That's the other game with a coastal team in it. That's not going to impact the standings. The real game that's going to be important there is 2 weeks from now when Pitt goes to Virginia Tech. So you've got these coastal teams slipping. You know what I mean? With 3 teams already sitting on 2 losses and 2 others already with sitting at 0-1, you've got these coastal teams slipping. If you can go 5-1, if Pitt can go 5-2 over these 7 games, as long as your loss is not to Virginia Tech in 2 weeks, or anybody else who would be within striking distance. I mean, they've effectively got a 3-game lead on Georgia Tech. They're going to have an opportunity to put that same kind of distance between them and North Carolina and them and Virginia. I mean, the path is laid out for them. And they could even lose 2 of these games. I think it'd still win the conference pretty comfortably. I don't know if we'll see 2 teams go 6-2 in the ACC this year. So, I mean, will they get to 10 wins? I don't know. That would mean going 6-1 over the final 7, which means they play pretty close to perfect the rest of the way. I don't know if they'll pull that off or not. I still have some question marks. I still have some concerns and some things that need to be addressed, and we'll see how it goes. And here's what I'll say. And before I jump back into more comments and questions, here's my overriding thought. All right, and this is my biggest thing that I've been sort of dwelling on this week, in the wake of all of it, in the face of all of it, aside from the individual accolades. And Anthony Tennyson, our guy Tony, already jumping in talking about Kenny Pickett with some of this Heisman talk. He wants to temper the expectations, and I understand all that. I think Kenny Pickett deserves whatever accolades he gets for his performance thus far through 5 games. I think Jordan Addison deserves whatever accolades he gets for his performance thus far through 5 games. Lucas Krull, take your pick, an offensive lineman, a running back, whatever it is. All right. I think they deserve the accolades they've gotten for their performance thus far through 5 games. But here's what I would say about the team. They're 4-1. They beat Tennessee on the road. They won their first conference game on the road. They lost to a MAC team at home. And then they beat an FCS team and another team that should be FCS. It's interesting to me. You get one big win in the conference. And by big, I mean a blowout win. I don't think anybody's building statues for beating Georgia Tech, but you get one blowout win in the conference, and we're talking about coastal favorite, conference favorite, 9% chance of making the playoffs, and all this stuff. And I know they're computer models, and they're based on explosive plays and scoring efficiency and red zone and all this different stuff. And I understand that it's not just a subjective thing, that it's not just a pollster or a reporter or a coach saying, I think Pitt is this. I understand all of that. But it's not exactly a body of work that you look at and say, yes, that's a team with an outside shot at the playoffs. Not yet. Not yet. And so what I've really kind of dealt with or been trying to figure out, and I tweeted something to this effect on earlier on the day here on Wednesday. I've really been trying to figure out is why is the optimism surging like it has? Why is the hype surged the way it has? The expectations surged the way they have? And the conclusion I come to is not necessarily that I think Pitt has looked like one of the top 4 teams in the country or one of the top 10 teams in the country or one of the best or anything like that. But what they've done is they've scored a buttload of points. They're the number 1 offense in college football. And while we can sit back and see issues with the defense or question marks about the defense or apparent vulnerabilities with the defense, nobody wants to think about what Sam Howell could potentially do against this defense. Although I think there are things to talk about, in that regard as well. But it's really about the offense. If Pitt came out of these first 5 games, same exact record, 4-1, 1-0 in the ACC. They lost to Western Michigan in a game that was like 13-10. They beat Tennessee on the road in a game that was like 17-14. If every game, and they did what they needed to do against UMass, maybe scored 30 some points against UMass, scored 35, maybe even 40 against, New Hampshire, and then went down to Georgia Tech and just, beat them up good, like 16-3 or something like that. But it was a team that was where its biggest strength was defense, just playing dominant defense. Would we be talking about them in the same way? If they came out of the Georgia Tech game with a 16-3 win, would people be talking about this is the Coastal favorite because of how dominant their defense is? I don't think so. Because there's an example of that to some extent at Clemson, where they're winning games. And I know they've got losses. They lost to Georgia to open the season. They lost to NC State, but the success of they're still one of the best defenses in the country. And certainly in the conference. But we're not talking, Clemson's the one with the arrow pointing down. Pitt, who's putting up points all over the place, is the one with the arrow pointing up. It's sort of like chicks digging the long ball. We get excited about offense. And maybe that's part of the reason that I think some Pitt fans are buying in a little bit more is because this team is winning with offense. The thing they did what they did on Saturday, and I think their defense was reasonably stout, but I think still had some holes that were concerning. But what they did on Saturday is they ran up the points, just like they did against New Hampshire. They lost to Western Michigan, but they still scored 41. They ran up the points against Tennessee, and they ran up the points against UMass. And you could go back into last season, like we talked about, where, they only scored 34 against Georgia Tech, and obviously Clemson, they didn't do much, but they were in the 40s against Florida State, and they were in the 40s against Virginia Tech. And you can look at this team sort of building this momentum now through 5 games this season and 2 out of the final 4 games last season. And you say, well, moving the ball pretty well. And that seems to be the source of the optimism. So I wonder if perception-wise, when we're looking at teams, and whether we look at Pitt or we look at teams nationally, do we look at them differently if we think they can score? You know what I mean? Do we look at them more favorably? Do we give them higher expectations or higher, more hype or more optimism if we think they can put up a bunch of points? And that comes down to sort of, I think, football philosophy, and particularly in 2021. Is it good enough if you can just score a boatload of points, even if your defense has question marks? And I think Pitt's defense is stout, and I think they could get better as the season goes on. I still haven't seen the huge physical issues aside from some missed tackles here and there. I think there's still fundamentals and schematic things they can hone. I think they did a decent job getting pressure on Jeff Sims, although I think the defensive line still needs to produce at a higher level. Even though they're top 10, Pitt is top 10 in sacks per game nationally. I think they still need to get more production out of the front 4. But all of that feels like a moot point to talk about missed tackles or pressures or busted coverage or defending RPOs. It all feels like a moot point when Kenny Pickett's dropping back to pass and you feel reasonably confident that he's going to complete the pass he's throwing. I said this during the game. I probably said this during the post-game show. I've said it on Twitter and stuff. I know I've talked to other people about it. You're at a point right now, or at least I was at a point on Saturday afternoon, where Kenny Pickett takes a snap, drops back. He's got time. Heaves a deep one. And you're watching the game on TV, so you don't know. You can't see if anybody's open down there. You can't see if anything's, when you're at the game, you see him loading up the fire deep one. You look and say, oh, yeah, there's Addison by himself. You're watching the game on TV, you don't know what's downfield. But when he's going through that motion and he's loading up that deep pass, I'm sitting there watching on TV and I'm thinking, this will probably be caught. And I'm almost surprised when it's not. Particularly if he's throwing to Jordan Addison. But Taysier Mack is a weapon in that regard as well. And if he's throwing to a guy like Jalen Barden or, a Jared Wayne or somebody like that, they're probably open. And that's due to play design, that's due to route running, and that's due to Pickett seeing the open receivers and firing to them. And when we see an offense that's really humming along like this one is, I think we start thinking the sky's the limit. Of course, the offense has to keep it up. The offense has to keep rolling. You know what I mean? The offense can't have a slip up. You don't want to put your defense in a position where they have to win the game. You want to keep scoring 50 a game or 40 a game. Right now, it looks like they can. All right, let's see here. So Tony Tennyson, Anthony started us off. Good evening, Chris. I'm going to start by saying all the Heisman talk about Pickett is definitely good for him, but I would say let's temper that talk a little bit. He's played against 3 cupcakes. Yeah, I mean, that's true. He's played New Hampshire. He played UMass. I'm not sure who the other cupcake would be. The SEC team, the MAC team, or the conference opponent. I would say if you're going to throw Georgia Tech into that category, well, I mean, the Coastal Division has quite a few of those same level cupcakes, which would indicate to me that, if we're really going to lump Georgia Tech into that category, then Pickett's going to keep putting up those stats, I would assume. And if he keeps putting up those stats, he's going to get himself into that conversation, provided Pitt keeps winning. John Christovich says, do you think Pitt has a chance to beat Virginia Tech on the road next week? Do I think Pitt has a chance? Of course they have a chance. I mean, why wouldn't they have a chance? I don't necessarily follow the logic. Looking at Virginia Tech here, just what they've done this season. So they beat Richmond 21-10. Same week that Pitt beat New Hampshire 77-7. Beat Richmond 21-10. Okay, so I don't know if that really strikes a lot of fear. They lost at West Virginia when they were ranked number 15. They went to West Virginia and lost 27-21. Week 2, Virginia Tech beat Middle Tennessee 35-14. And week 1, Virginia Tech beat North Carolina 17-10. I'm not sure what I would look at in that, resume to make me say that, no, they don't have a chance against Virginia Tech. I mean, they absolutely have a chance at Virginia Tech. And they've won at Virginia Tech. Narduzzi has won at Virginia Tech. He won at Virginia Tech in his first season. And, lost at home against Virginia Tech the next year. Lost down there in 2017. Then, 2018 and 2020 were pretty strong blowouts. Last year wasn't really a competitive game. And I think you would contend that Pitt's offense is even better this year. So does Pitt have a chance to beat Virginia Tech? Absolutely. Chris J says, do you think Kenny Pickett running to the sideline to talk to the offensive coordinator hurts the offense? I haven't heard a lot of talk about that this year. I have not heard a lot of talk about it. S. Mac says, I heart Lucas Krull and Gavin Bartholomew. That's a dominant, well, I shouldn't say a dominant duo right there, but those two guys are playing really well. You talk about, we've talked for so long about how Pitt needs a tight end to make plays. We've talked for so long about how, it's been since 2016 since Pitt had an impact player at tight end. And now they've got these two guys who, Lucas Krull is, his touchdown catch was something else, and he played really well in a scramble drill one play earlier to pick up a first down. And Gavin Bartholomew, you talk about a fan favorite. He's playing as well as any freshman tight end I've seen since J.P. Holtz in 2012. And J.P. Holtz was pretty good in 2012. He was really good in 2012. And I think Bartholomew's right up there with it. He just, I forget if J.P. Holtz had anybody else as like the top tight end in 2012. I forget who else was on the roster. If Hubie Graham was still on the roster then, or 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Hubie Graham might have still been on the roster. Or no, not Andrew Devlin, but I think Hubie Graham might have been there. But I mean, J.P. Holtz played really well as a freshman, and Bartholomew is living up to that level. I think he's going to help this team. He's going to score this year, and I think he'll make some key plays. He'll continue to make some key plays for Pitt as the season goes on. Brock Madonic says, any word or insight that you know where Pitt stands with Davison Igbinason, who also is Pitt now the presumed favorite. Lastly, who was his main recruiter? Thanks. And he also says, do you expect to see him visit for a game? Yeah, Davison Igbinason is a defensive back from New Jersey. He took an official visit to Pitt over the summer, ended up committing to Rutgers just this week. He decommitted from Rutgers. And yeah, I think Pitt is very much involved here. I think they stayed involved throughout the time when he was committed to Rutgers. And I think they were probably at least part of the reason that he decommitted. I think his interest in Pitt. And his main recruiter, I believe, is Tim Salem. I have to check and see if he's North Jersey or South Jersey, but Salem does a lot of stuff out there. I don't know if Pitt is the presumed favorite, but I think they're definitely going to be involved. And what you'll look for here, and I put this on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Brock, is what you'll look for here is whether or not he comes in for that Clemson game in a couple weeks, 3 weeks from now. That's the one where they're going to try and get a lot of guys to visit, and that's certainly they're going to try and get him to visit as well. Let's see. Roman says, hey, Chris, took your advice and went to Atlanta this week for the game. What an amazing city. Had an amazing time. Yeah, I talked about Atlanta last week. That was one of the things we talked about on last week's Panther-Lair show. I think Atlanta's a great place to go. If you're going to go on a trip in the coastal, that's or in the conference, that's the place to go. I think. I mean, the stadium's fine. I think it's nice enough. But Atlanta as a city it's a great place to be. It's easy to get around. I mean, that's one of the things that I've really come to appreciate is I don't have to rent a car when I go to Atlanta. You can just get around that easy. Brock Madonic says, what's your outlook on Brandon George so far through these 5 games? I think he's played all right. We haven't seen as much of him. I don't think he played all that much in the Georgia Tech game. He played a whole lot against New Hampshire. Let me just bring up the defensive stats here for the Georgia Tech game. Brandon George. I'm sure he played, but Pro Football Focus is not. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, I mean, Pro Football Focus is not. I thought he got in on defense, but they're not showing him having any snaps. He must have played on special teams, I would guess. Yeah, he played 18 snaps on special teams, but it looks like he didn't play anything on the defense. I like Brandon George. I thought he played well against New Hampshire. I think, when you look at, Servassier Dennis and Wendell Davis as your top 2 middle linebackers right now, I mean, I think I liked what I saw to Brandon George against New Hampshire. I would probably be inclined to rotate Servassier Dennis at one of the outside linebacker spots, roll with Wendell Davis at middle linebacker, and bring in Brandon George in a rotation. Maybe depending on the defense that you're facing, but that might be what I would do. I liked what he did against New Hampshire. I'd like to see him get some more opportunities, and I'd like to see Servassier Dennis play outside a little bit more than he has, but see what the coaches decide to go with. Big Cliff says you have to place a bet tomorrow on who wins the ACC title game. Where's your bread going? Tomorrow, huh? How can I bet on that tomorrow, Big Cliff? I need to see if Pitt's offense is going to keep this up. I mean, it's been lights out so far, but let's see if they keep it up over the course of every week. Now, I mean, look, you can sit back and be like, "What are you looking for? What else do you need?" It's been 5 games, and Kenny Pickett's thrown 1 interception and 19 touchdown passes. How much more do you need to see? And I agree. And Pickett has been outstanding, and Jordan Addison has been awesome. And like we said, Kroll and Bartholomew have been great weapons. I think the running game's coming along. I think the offensive line is coming along. There's a lot to like here. I'm going to need to see a little bit more before I put my money on it. I'm going to need to be convinced that Pitt's offense sustains this over the course of a full season, and I'm going to need to be convinced that Clemson's offense doesn't figure it out over the course of a full season. I'm going to need to be convinced that this truly is a down year for Clemson and not just a slow start. And I'm going to need to be convinced that this is a step up year for Pitt and not just a fast start. And that's not saying that I doubt Pitt's start. It's not saying that I doubt Clemson's start. But maybe I have to be the man, you got to beat the man type of thing. And that game, on Silver Shamrock Day on October 23rd is the one that I'm going to point to. And if Pitt beats Clemson, then yeah. Although Steele Broderick comes up right after here and says the Virginia Tech game is more important than the Clemson game. And there's some real truth to that. There's some real truth to that because, you rank the games in importance. Conference games are more important than non-conference games. Coastal games are more important than the crossover games. And they're more important because they put space between you and the other teams in your division. So, Pitt right now 1-0, Georgia Tech 1-2, but by virtue of Pitt holding a head-to-head tiebreaker, they're effectively 3 games ahead of Georgia Tech. And that possibility, you beat Virginia Tech, you're going to be 2 games ahead of Virginia Tech. If you beat, go through the coastal teams, you can create separation. And Virginia Tech being the only other undefeated team in the coastal right now in terms of conference records, yeah, that's absolutely a crucial game and maybe more important than Clemson. Now, if you lose to Virginia Tech, you need to beat Clemson in order to keep your, so you don't fall into 2 losses in the conference. But the easiest way to avoid that is to go out and beat Virginia Tech. Homer Simpson says, it feels good knowing that you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, best wide receivers and tight ends. People are jealous. We got to keep it up. Yeah, and that is probably, as I talk about where does the hype come from, where does the excitement come from? Oh, it's because they're scoring so many points. It's because they have a quarterback playing at a really high level. And I think when we look around the country, you look at the teams that have success, the teams that really excel, and the teams that get people excited, they're the teams that have a quarterback playing at a really high level. And he's got really good weapons to throw to. And he's killing it out there. And that's what Kenny Pickett's doing. He is killing it out there. Will Z says, until proven otherwise, I still see Pitt losing around 3 more games, probably Clemson and Miami and maybe Virginia Tech. 7-5, 8-4 records tend to be the Dew's norm. Praying I'm wrong. I can't disagree. Obviously, Pat Narduzzi's lost at least 4 regular season games every year he's been at Pitt. 5 regular season games in most of those seasons, other than 2015 and 2016. You're right. He's never had, all due respect to that 2016 offense, he's never had an offense that could attack the way this one can. This one, no, it doesn't have the sweeps. It doesn't have the window dressing and the motion and all the confusion that 2016 offense created for opponents. But it does have the ability to strike, and it has a passing game that is developed well beyond that 2016 offense. And I think they can strike from anywhere. And they're hitting those big plays, but you almost have a feeling of, and again, this was certainly present during the Georgia Tech game, but, kind of overall in the season, you get into 3rd and longer situations, maybe not 3rd and 14, but 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. Those don't feel like, those don't feel like impossible down and distance situations with this offense and the way they're going right now. Whereas I think the 2016 offense, it was tougher to convert those longer things because they didn't have the passing game developed the way this one is. They could throw to Scott Orndorff, they could throw to Jester Weah. That was good, but they didn't have a Jordan Addison in 2016. They didn't have they had Scott Orndorff. Lucas Kroll is a different kind of animal, though. This offense, it gives you believe that you're not really out of it because it feels like they can score almost any time. And so I think that might be what sets this team apart a little bit. Now, what you need is the defense to continue developing. All right. You need the defense to continue making little improvements, getting more pressure on the quarterbacks. But I think ultimately it's going to be about this offense. So when they play North Carolina, maybe when they play Virginia, they might be in a shootout. It might be 45-44, just to pick a score at random. Although North Carolina's offensive line looks pretty weak right now. So Pitt might be able to get some pressure on Sam Howell and make life difficult for him. Let's see here. Scrolling down. Stashy says, didn't see the Kenny Pickett show today. Is he big timing you? No, it's he didn't. He did not big time us. Kenny Pickett, when we drew up the plans for the Kenny Pickett show back in August, late July, I think it was, because we started right in the beginning of August. We drew up the plans for the Kenny Pickett show and kind of laid out all the episodes we want to do, the weeks. And we said, well, there's this off week here. We'll take that week off. We'll have that week off. Now, little did I know he was going to come off a performance like that, where he throws for 389 and 4 touchdowns and puts himself into the Heisman conversation and gets all this national hype. I was not anticipating that, but that's all right. That's how it worked. We're going to have Kenny with us every week for the rest of the season, and I'm excited. I hope you guys are checking out these episodes and enjoying it, because you're getting insight and really kind of joining Kenny, I think, on this journey, where he's going out with a bang. I mean, he's having his best season. He's already broken his career record for touchdowns passes in a single season. And he's well on his way, barring injury or some crazy freak thing happening. He's on his way to setting the Pitt, career passing record. He's playing at another level, and there's only one place that you're really going to get weekly insights from him. Kind of in-depth weekly insights, and that's right on our show, the Kenny Pickett Show. So, I mean, I feel like we're incredibly blessed to have put this together. I feel like we're really lucky to have it, and I hope you guys are checking it out and enjoying it as well. David Allen says, any thoughts on basketball as it starts up? Last Thursday, we got to go down to the Peterson Event Center and watch the first practice of the season. Hang out, watch a little Pitt hoops, and it was the first time seeing a lot of those guys, Mo Gee and Dan Oladapo and Jamarius Burton and Chris Payton and Nate Santos, and then also get another look at John Hughley, who's back with the team for the first time, at least first time publicly, and see how Noah Collier and Will Jeffress progressed, and how's Femi Odekale doing in sort of a leadership role now. It was really interesting, and they told us to come down for about a 45-minute to 60-minute session or so of watching practice. It ended up being closer to like 2 hours, so we got to see a lot from one practice. And then, of course, you'll be able to check it out on Saturday. I think at 2:00 they're having an open scrimmage, so you can you can go look for yourself and kind of make your own observations and judge what you see. My thoughts, and I wrote about this on the board. I wrote about this in my post-practice observations. I wrote about it in the 3-2-1 column on Friday. I mean, last year you went into the season, you knew you had Justin Champagnie. That was the star guy. He was the main attraction, right? The year before that, it was Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowens. And even going into their freshman year, those guys were something of a draw. And before that, you would have like a Jamel Artis and a Mike Young, Lamar Patterson, marquee players. For lack of a better term, as much of a marquee player as Lamar Patterson ever was, or Brad Wanamaker ever was. And there were guys who were draws, and you knew going into the season, you had a pretty good feeling about who was going to be the leading scorer, who was going to be the man, who were people going to buy tickets to go see. And I don't see that on this team right now. I don't see who that marquee player is. You could make a case for about 6 different guys being the leading scorer on this team this year. And it might end up that they all sort of trade off on that role. And it ends up with a bunch of guys averaging less than 12 points per game, which has happened in the past with varying results. But that's kind of how I see this team, because I don't see that standout guy, that they have had. There isn't a Justin Champagnie, at least not one who's established now, and I'm not sure who has the potential to do that. So this team is gonna have to be I mean, more of a team. And I think when you look at Jeff Capel's comments and the things he said on Thursday when he talked to us after that press conference or after that practice, I mean, he talked about a lot of those concepts, that it's going to have to be more of a team. It's not going to be just one guy leading in scoring or one guy who provides the bulk of the offense. It's not going to be like that because they're not built that way this year. And maybe that's for the better. You know what I mean? If you have a bunch of guys all trying to contribute their roles, and that was something else Capel talked about, that, you know, guys just have to know their role, fit into their role, and play their role. And if they do that, then maybe they'll have a chance to succeed. And I think that's what it's going to have to be. And I, you know, I feel like I'm sort of underselling the team a little bit. I feel like I'm kind of making it sound like they're not going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think it's going to be a boring team to watch because I think there's so many unknowns and new players and guys who are going to be put into bigger roles than they've ever had before. And it's going to be, it's going to be interesting just because we don't know what it's going to be. And so that's kind of my thoughts right now. And I don't know what to expect from this team. My guess is that they won't be all that prolific offensively, but I think they'll play hard on defense. I think they'll play with a lot of energy and intensity on defense. If they communicate well, they can be scrappy enough to keep themselves in games. We'll see if they're committed to playing that way. Talk is Pitt says, I think the Virginia Tech game may turn out like the Georgia Tech game. I get it. It may be hard to beat them in Blacksburg, but I think Pitt wins 41-20. Remember this score from Virginia Tech and Richmond game, 21-10. Yeah, you know, I thought about that during, you know, the game 2 weeks ago when Pitt was beating New Hampshire 77-7 and Virginia Tech was eking past Richmond 21-10. You know, I mean, we've seen Pat Narduzzi teams. That 2016 team beat Villanova like 28-7. You know, it's not always, it's hard to draw a lot of conclusions from that kind of stuff. I don't want to sit here and say, oh, Virginia Tech just barely snuck by Richmond. Pitt's going to have a hard time with them. Pitt's going to have a hard time with Virginia Tech, or I expect them to have a challenge at Virginia Tech because Virginia Tech typically provides a challenge for Pitt, particularly when you play on the road. You know what I mean? It hasn't gone well down there. They've won games down there, but it hasn't gone well down there. So it, you know, in the last few trips. So I mean, that's why I think it'll be challenging. I mean, I still have enough questions about this team and about the rest of the ACC that it's going to be a few weeks before I think we really get into the territory where there are outcomes that surprise me. You know what I mean? If this game ends up being 41-20 next Saturday, I don't think I'll be terribly surprised. Maybe a little bit. And if it ends up being 24-21, I don't think I'll be terribly surprised because I'm still trying to figure out who this team is and who the rest of the ACC is. RJC Man 38 says Pitt's O-line looks great. Worry if they have a heavily whistled game. Can Pitt's offense produce? The ACC refs will pull some games on Pitt, just not playing the opponent, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't know. I've always been of the mind that the officiating is bad and it typically goes both ways. You know, I mean, if they're calling every hold that they see, they're probably going to call most of the, you know, defensive holding or pass interference. And so you balance out a little bit there. I don't know. I know there were a lot of sort of, a lot of cries of missed calls and holding calls that should have been called in that Georgia Tech game. I guess so. I'm of the opinion that there's holding in every game, you know, on almost every play. Those penalties, you know, you could get a lot of penalties thrown. And Pitt's offense, with the way they try and move the ball, yeah, they're going to be subject to it, you know, and there are going to be games where they get some holding calls that hurt them and set them back. It's just about how they bounce back and overcome. Let's see here. Colin Sisk, our guy. Colin Sisk, Big Tuna chiming in. Love to hear from you, buddy. Mentioned in the run of tight ends in the early 2010s, I think Bartholomew may have as good of pass catching skills as any of them did pre-JP Holtz, and he's probably better than first-year JP Holtz was. Huge upside. Yeah, I agree. Corey Colton says as far as individual play, he has to be the biggest surprise of the season. I agree. I mean, I think, and there was so much talk about Bartholomew through the spring. The coaches were obviously really excited about him. His teammates were really excited about him. They liked what they had seen from him in spring practice and the offseason workouts and all those things. But we hear hype about guys, and they don't always live up to it. We hear guys kind of get hyped up by the coaches, by the players from practices and workouts, but they don't know. It doesn't always translate. Well, it's definitely translated with Bartholomew. I mean, I think he has been really, really good. And again, this is at a position where they've needed it. They've needed somebody like Lucas Krull to step up and have the season that he's having. And they've tried to get all these grad transfer tight ends to come in and have that kind of season, whether it was Will Gregg or Matt Flanagan or Nakia Griffin-Stewart or Chris Clark came in. I know he was just a transfer. He wasn't a graduate transfer, but they tried bringing in all these transfers to try and fill it, and none of them really clicked until Krull this year. But then on the other side, they've also got a freshman now. So it doesn't just have to be a one-year fill-in. They've got a freshman who's going to be here for a few years and presumably grow and develop and become even better as his career goes on. So it's pretty, it's pretty fun to watch. You know what I mean? It's fun to see him get the ball in his hands. He runs with a purpose. He breaks tackles. He gets yards after the catch. He's playing really well. There's no question. I was just looking at this from the Georgia Tech game. These stats, yards after the catch. He only had 13. Slacking. Come on, Bartholomew. You're slacking. You only have 13 yards after the catch. He's averaging 8.6 yards after the catch per reception this season, which I think, and I'll bring up Pitt's season grades real quick before we get back into the comments and questions. See who leads the team in yards after the catch. I know he's actually second in average. Total yards after the catch, Jordan Addison has 204. Jared Wayne has 101. Bartholomew is fifth with 77. But in terms of yards after the catch per reception, Vincent Davis is number one at 9.3. Gavin Bartholomew is number two at 8.6 yards after the catch per reception on the team. So there's sample sizes. He's only caught 9 passes. Incidentally, he's only been targeted 9 times. But that's pretty good. Pretty good for the freshman tight end to be second on the team in yards after the catch per reception. Scrolling down here. Will Z says, if it monsoons at Virginia Tech again like it did in 2019, I'm going to be pissed. Every time I go to Blacksburg, the weather is awful. Yeah, it was terrible weather last year, or 2 years ago, 2019. And then either in 2015 or 2013, there was a hurricane. And there was a chance the game was going to be canceled. I can't remember if it was 13 or 15, but I feel like it rained both times. But one of them, I think it might have been 15. It seemed like the game might be canceled. I think even 2017, the game with Jester Wee at the 1 yard line, I feel like even that one had bad weather and had rain. Let's see here. Royce Beacom says, I believe Will Z is correct in your projections about losing 3 more games. The third loss is North Carolina at a minimum. Will the Pitt administration, after the additional 3 losses, go along with the business as usual? Maybe necessary because no alternatives are available. I don't know if you. I don't think you can fire. I don't know if you can fire Pat Narduzzi if he goes 8-4. I don't think you would fire Pat Narduzzi if he goes 8-4. I don't think you should fire Pat Narduzzi if he goes 8-4. If you win 8 games, in the regular season, I think you should be in pretty good shape, I would think. Tyler Buchanan says, speaking of love for tight ends, where's the love for Chris Wilson? Nobody ever brings him up in the forums. You're right. Nobody does. I don't know if he got overshadowed by Larry Fitzgerald, but I mean, he was a playmaker. He was a good player in Walt Harris's offense, and he definitely made he made a lot of plays. He was good athletic pass catching, tight end, no question. Let's see here. Garrett Sherwin says Servassier and Dennis and Kalijah Kancey having a down year. Feels like they were making more impact plays last year. So Servassier Dennis is playing a new position. I think he knows how to. I don't think he's still learning middle linebacker. I think he knows what he needs to do at middle linebacker, but I think he's more effective as an outside linebacker. I don't think he's been as effective and as productive at middle linebacker as he was at outside linebacker. I think when you just look at skill sets and where a guy fits the best, I think he fits the best outside. I think the Pitt coaches want to get their best 3 linebackers on the field, and I think that's why you see Servassier Dennis starting in between Cam Bright and Phil Campbell. But I think you gain more by – I think you could have a net gain if you move him back outside and try to work other guys inside, work Wendell Davis inside, potentially Brandon George inside. That's what I would say about Dennis, though. I think he's still trying to settle into a new position. Kalijah Kancey, let me see if I have his Pitt. I don't have his Pitt stats, his official. Let's see if I can bring up his stats real quick. Just because I actually don't think he's having a down year. I think he's actually played really well. He's got NCAA's website is terrible. 3.5 sacks so far this year as a defensive tackle. But I'll do this. How about this? He is Pitt's highest rated defensive player, according to Pro Football Focus. Now, you can say what you want about Pro Football Focus grades, this and that. He's a 90.5 overall defensive rating. The next highest player on defense is like in the 70s. All right. He's, Pro Football Focus sees Kalijah Kancey as, sees him as Pitt's best overall defensive players. Pro Football Focus records pressures. They have Habakkuk Baldonado leading the team with 14 pressures. Kalijah Kancey is second with 12 pressures. I think he's playing really well. Those numbers aren't going to always stick out, although 3.5 sacks is pretty good for a defensive tackle. You're not going to always be hugely productive as a defensive tackle, but I think Kancey does a good job there. They rotate those defensive tackles a lot, but I think he's played well. I think he's done a really good job. And like I say, Pro Football Focus likes him a lot. Will Z says, I wonder if they will move Servassier Dennis to outside linebacker for a big game to surprise the opponent in coverage. Well, Will, you just brought up a potential secret strategy, and I'm sure Pat Narduzzi has snipers coming to your house right now. So it was nice knowing you. I apologize, but you are now about to be killed for putting that out there for Virginia Tech to find out. All right. See here, last one. Butthole Bandit says Virginia Tech was smart. They would do wide receiver screens all the way down the field. When do we hold Pat accountable for the bad DB play that hasn't improved in 6 years? Well, I think you're just I would disagree with your premise that it hasn't improved in 6 years. I think, first of all, you're saying DB. You're using the entire defensive backfield. I think the corners have been pretty good this year. I think they were even better last year. I think Dane Jackson was really good 2 years ago. I think you put in, you lose Damari Mathis last year. Marquez Williams steps in and I think plays pretty well. That's on development. Damar Hamlin was a great safety by the end of his career. I think that's on development. I think Brandon Hill is coming along nicely. I think Eric Hallett has some work to do. I think Eric Hallett has a big job as the field safety, and he's got to continue improving and getting better. I think Damari Mathis has played relatively well this year. There have been some issues, in the secondary, but on the whole, it's still better than it was 6 years ago. I would definitely say that the defensive backs have improved. And if Virginia Tech wants to run wide receiver screens all the way down the field, I believe Pitt can adjust to it and make changes and find a way to stop it. So, but that's just me. We'll see if that's what Virginia Tech plans to do. They're obviously going to play Notre Dame first. So if you're looking for something interesting to do this weekend, the games to watch this weekend. If you are watching college football this weekend, and why wouldn't you? Duke and Georgia Tech are at 12:30 on ESPN3. Virginia and Louisville are at 3 o'clock on ACC Network. Wake Forest at Syracuse at 3:30 on ESPN2. Florida State at Carolina at 3:30 on ESPN. That's one to watch. You want to see North Carolina. That's probably the most interesting game, I would say, aside from the night game, 7:30 Notre Dame at Virginia Tech. That one's on the ACC Network. So that's weird. But those are the games to watch. And, I mean, I think you just want to root for, Georgia Tech or Duke. I don't know who you really want to root for there. I don't think Duke should be a problem for Pitt. But it would be nice, if you want Georgia Tech to get another, get a third conference loss. It just seems cruel at this point. And then root for Louisville to beat Virginia. Root for Florida State to beat Carolina. Root for Notre Dame, Virginia Tech. I don't know. Just watch the game and see what you think of Virginia Tech, right? Just watch the game and see what you think. All right. Thanks everybody for jumping in on the live chat tonight. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's where all our videos are. And when we do post-game shows, you'll know when we go live if you're subscribed. You will get a notification. When we do our Wednesday night shows at 8:30, you'll know when we go live because you'll get a notification. When we post new videos of press conferences and things like that, you'll know because you'll get a notification. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. While you're at it, go to Home Field, get this sweet vintage rock shirt, homefieldapparel.com. It's the best place you're going to find for Pitt shirts. High quality, great logos, great designs, and it's just a great shirt. I've been wearing this for like 2 years now. You guys have been seeing this on the podcast for 2 years now. Go get one. Go to homefieldapparel.com. And like I said, if you are a first-time shopper at homefieldapparel.com, you can use the promo code LAIR, L-A-I-R, and get 15% off. So go do that, homefieldapparel.com. Make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com throughout the week, throughout the weekend. We'll have everything you need to get ready for this big push, starting with Virginia Tech next Saturday. I can't wait. It's going to be a long time until that game. It's like 10 days. It's 10 days too many. Wish there was a game this weekend, not for Pitt's betterment, but just for my own personal enjoyment, because it seems like it's fun right now. So we'll see where things go. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks everybody who listened to the podcast during the week, and have a great rest of the week. Obviously no post-game show this week, so have a good weekend, and we will talk to you next Wednesday night.